The National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, has created guidance to identify and manage bias in artificial intelligence. The National Fair Housing Alliance wants to make sure that communities of color and other underserved communities get fair access to mortgages and other services. Michael Akinwumi is the Chief Tech Equity Officer at the National Fair Housing Alliance. Michael, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, nice to meet you.
Explain to me how artificial intelligence can perpetuate discrimination or bias.
Yeah, so when it comes to artificial intelligence, or an example of it, which is machine learning, so they are powered by data. And if you really want to understand how AI or artificial intelligence can perpetuate or exacerbate discrimination or bias, it's good to actually start with the history behind the data. So, for example, if you look at financial services or housing, so the Homeowners Loan Corporation, which was actually established by Homeowners Loan Act in 1933, systematically excluded people of color from having access to housing or even credit. And what that means is that if you don't even have access to credit, there's no way you can actually be visible in the data that is being used to develop these algorithms.
So essentially, the algorithm looked at all the people that have credit. They said, oh, there's not a lot of people of color represented there. Therefore, let's not give credit and mortgages to people of color.
Exactly, because what AI actually does is that they are limited to the patterns that are represented in the data. So if they are not visible in the data, there is no way the algorithm or AI or even machine learning can actually pick them up, because they are not even well represented in the data. And that's how, because another thing is that there's a lot of different ways where the data is already biased, and it continues to actually reinforce that pattern, which marginalizes or reduces the representation of the people of color in the data.
So then, is there particular data sets that should be excluded? Should you say, we don't want to look at race at all in this data, let's take it out?
Yeah, so when it comes to like the applicable law, so we have ECOA, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, which clearly states variables that are actually not allowed to be used in determining who has access to credit or housing, right? So, for example, you're not allowed to use age, you're not allowed to use sex, race, and all that. So, yes, and similarly, when it comes to like Fair Housing Act, so we have, for example, we're not allowed to use familial status and other variables. So, yes, there are variables that should be excluded from being used in the algorithm.
So give me a brief overview then of NIST's guidance when it comes to managing and mitigating bias.
Yeah, so NIST actually did a very good job, in our opinion, of trying to identify the different areas where bias can actually come in. So when it comes to the life cycle or the development of an AI solution, so NIST identified 3 stages. So the first stage, they call it the pre-design stage, where there's a lot of consultation, trying to understand, okay, what the business problem is, what are the requirements and all that. Then they move on to the design stage and also the development stage. And there, that is when you make decisions in terms of like what variables you want to use. For example, I mentioned variables that are not allowed to be used under the Equal Credit Opportunity Act or even Fair Housing Act. So NIST did a very good job of identifying what areas discrimination or bias could actually come in at the design and development stage. And then from there, they went on to the deployment stage, because once you develop the solution, then the next thing is that you want to actually put it in a production environment where it impacts people. So in our opinion, that's actually like the starting point, because as you probably saw in our recommendation, so there's still a 4th stage that is actually excluded, and that is monitoring. So the common belief among people is that when you deploy AI solution, it never expires, it doesn't have a lifetime, but there is a popular quote that all models, including AI models, they actually have a lifespan. So, and that's why we recommend that the solutions that are deployed should also be monitored. And not only that, even in the pre-design stage or throughout those processes, voices or opinions of civil rights advocates should actually be integrated into the processes, because these are people who truly understand the history behind the data and where discrimination or bias could actually amplify through the process.
So Michael, we've been talking about how AI can amplify bias, but can it also be used on the other side? Can it be used to find and address bias and discrimination?
Yeah, that's right. So it could be used, so like there are a lot of different ways or benefits that actually come with AI. For example, when it comes to identifying what actually really constitutes bias, right? So one thing that the data science community has actually done is trying to map out all these 3 different areas that reflect the different stages that NIST has also, mapped out. So for example, we could use algorithm to identify bias at the pre-design stage and also use it to remove it. And even at the development stage, so there are a lot of techniques out there, even within at NAFA, that's one of the things we're also reviewing and looking into. So there are algorithms that could be used to actually remove the bias as well.
All right, well, Michael, there's so much more to say about this, but we've run out of time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.